Again, we know, of course, that we have a number of folk who are sharing with us online, and we're glad to welcome you as well to this session. For those of you who weren't with us about 15 minutes ago, I'm Derrick Harkins, and I serve as the Senior Vice President for Public Engagement here at the Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York, and we are delighted for what has truly become so far a rich and rewarding time of real engagement around this critical issues, I should say critical series of issues or number of issues, because they all stand under the umbrella of our concern in a larger measure for issues that surround the climate. We're thankful for our panelists who are going to be with us for this next session. We're going to be spending time talking about the intersectionality of racial justice and climate change. One of the things that, without rehashing our prior session, but one of the things that is we did speak about the questions of investment, divestment, reinvestment, the moral imperative as it relates to this set of issues is critical and crucial. And what better way to talk about some of that moral imperative than by some of what will hopefully be brought to light in the course of these next moments. Let me introduce our panelists in a moment, but let me just say, as we begin to set this table, if you will, around the intersectionality of racial justice and climate change, we know that it's the same mentality that drove the slave trade and the decimation of native cultures we know is linked to the mentality that drives racism and the exploitation also of the natural world. We know that there is significant discussion and debate around a number of ideologies, even theologies, that no doubt will be a part of the discussion as we move forward here. And so we're very fortunate to have with us this morning some individuals who will no doubt really be able to bring significant light to this conversation. Let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll allow for them to unfold as they see fit. Elizabeth Yeampierre is a nationally recognized Puerto Rican attorney and environmental justice leader of African and indigenous ancestry, born and raised here in New York City. She is executive director of UPROSE, Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization. She's a longtime advocate and trailblazer for community organizing around just, sustainable development, environmental justice, and community-led climate adaptation and community resiliency in Sunset Park. And then let me also introduce Mindahi Bastida Muñoz. Mindahi Bastida Muñoz is the general coordinator of the Otomi Ñañu Regional Council in Mexico, a caretaker of the philosophy and traditions of the Otomi people, and he's been an Otomi ritual ceremony officer since 1988. And he's the president of the Mexico Council of Sustainable Development. Also, Geraldine and Patrick Encina. Geraldine and Patrick Encina is a member of the Otomi Ñañu Regional Council in Mexico and a professor of ethno-ecology, and she indeed also, her research focuses on archaeoastronomy and cultural astronomy, particularly on ancestral and current ways of measuring and conceiving time and natural cycles in Mesoamerica. Also with us, we are excited that Catherine Flowers, she is a senior fellow for the Center for Earth Ethics. She's the founder of the Alabama Center for Rural Enterprise, which seeks to address the root causes of poverty and also seeks sustainable solutions. And we're very excited about the fact that we have had the chance in quite recent days to do some significant work in Alabama with Catherine, so we're excited for all of their presence. Even before they begin to speak, why don't we welcome our panelists this morning. I'm going to ask, since all of them bring such a wealth of information for them to be prepared to share, and let me ask Elizabeth if you'd begin our conversation with your remarks. Yeah, that's fine.
Buenos días, mi gente.
Yes.
It is a pleasure to be here with you today. And before I begin, I really want to thank the Center for Earth Ethics and Karina Gore and Shay O'Reilly A month ago, UPROSE holds the largest gathering of young people of color on climate change in the country. And a month ago, we held it here at Union Theological. And I just want to quickly share that experience with you, because today we're going to be talking about building just relationships and how, regardless of what the recommendations are, whether we're talking about divestment and we're talking about just transitions, unless we change the way we engage with each other, we will fail. And so what happened with the Center for Earth Ethics and our organization was really what I call a model of the Gemes principles in action. We went to Corinna and we said, we need a space to bring our young people to learn about how to address climate change in a very local way. We prioritize young people of color because they've been left out of the conversation. And she said, well, let us know how we can help you. And all they did was help. They didn't get in the front. They didn't lead, they didn't manage us, they didn't have deficit-based expectations. All they did was facilitate it so that our young people could be in the front. The year before, we held it at the Green Jobs High School. It's a public school in New York City. And when they saw all those young people united from every community in New York City come together, they called 2 paddy wagons and parked them in front and brought in the police so that they basically, through their presence, criminalize the space. A radical difference between how they saw leadership, how they saw our young people at risk instead of at potential, and how the Center for Earth Ethics showed up in the work and made it possible for us to have a really beautiful, successful event. So that made me feel, since I am always working at the intersection of racial justice and climate change and fighting people who should be our allies, that made me feel that the possibilities were endless, that there is hope, that there are people who are willing to do it differently. And I'd like you to give a hand of applause for the Center for Earth Ethics. Thank you. So I was born and raised in New York City. My experience is very urban, so urban that police sirens lull me to sleep and crickets drive me to distraction. And grew up was displaced as a child several times and grew up in environments where we were considered excess population from Puerto Rico. That's how we ended up here. And there was some disinvestment in our communities during the 70s. Grew up during a time when things were really, really difficult. And so I had all of the challenges that people growing up in the 70s faced in New York City, in terms of not having the kinds of things and really having racism up front. But one of the really amazing things was that my mom, who is a santera, I grew up in Yoruba practices, and I want to share that with you because it was a home where people of African ancestry and indigenous backgrounds came together, where our rituals, our medicine, our practice was rooted in our connection to the natural environment, right? And that we understood that Ochun represented the water, fresh water, that Yeampierre represented the ocean. And these were things that were not only important for us, but also the fact that there were people in my home who came from Brazil, from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from all over the world, and shared these practices, this belief that not only shared how we saw the world and helped us understand that, but also politicized us. We learned that for generations, our people who because this problem of climate crisis did not begin with the extraction of fossil fuel, began with the extraction of our labor. And so to learn that for generations, our people of African and indigenous ancestry, the descendants of colonization and slavery, have had the worst food, the worst housing, the worst healthcare, the worst of everything, right? And that shows up as disease. And now we live in urban and rural areas where we're the reluctant host to all of the environmental burdens that serve the most privileged communities. Not only are we faced with that, but we're also, despite the fact that we didn't contribute to it, now having to deal with climate change. There is nothing more sustainable than a poor person. We have always reused, recycled, and reused because necessity makes you that way. And in addition to that, the fact that our traditions have basically been connected to the earth, we have become very different people in this country. So we have the opportunity now, because, to be American means to be addicted to consumption culture and to be wasteful. And so when our people come to this country, those that choose to come here, not those that were forced to come here, Those who choose to come here, they have this dream, this American dream, that they are going to have all these things that they didn't have before. But the reality is that climate change is demanding a different rhythm, a different way of having things, that we're going to have to live with what we need and not with what we want, and that we're going to have to look deep into those traditions that we're bringing from other places and redefine what it is to be American. So if you're from Mexico, you're going to know how to work the land, and if you're from China, you're going to know how to do a lot with a little. These things, these traditions, this history, this information, this local knowledge that people are bringing in is not only going to redefine us, but it's going to help us survive. So what is the big obstacle and what is the big problem? When we look at not just the climate deniers and the folks that don't really believe that California is burning, or that Yemen is out of water, or that Bangladesh is losing land, or that the Gulf South is losing the size of a football field every hour, those folks that are in denial, there's them. And then there are the folks that are our allies. And those people really can play a major role in either making it possible for our communities to survive or will slow down progress. We know that by 2042, we will be the majority in this country. That means that the majority of this country is going to look like the people in this table. So we need to be able to own this issue the way people before us owned the civil rights movement. And so people who have good intentions really sort of helicopter in our community and want to manage us, lead us, and speak for us. But the climate justice movement says that this is not the 70s anymore. We speak for ourselves. Going to take out the people least responsible for it first. So a lot of people like talking about how we're all the same and how we have to work together, but they need to work on leveling the playing field. And that may mean stepping back and doing a dance and doing it in a way that's very different than the way that we have been conditioned to do it. So, and I use the example of how we did the Climate Justice Youth Summit because I felt like that was an example of how it works. That was an example about how people who have access to resources can work with people who don't, and how people who don't can lead. And that it was a respectful, beautiful relationship that is now the foundation for other things that we can do together. I had been asked to talk a little bit about our belief system. And I also, when we were learning about Jesus as kids, and we did, people who believe, who are in Candomblé and who are in Santeria believe in Jesus, we learned about a different kind of Jesus. We learned that Jesus was an activist, that the apostles were his organizers, that he lived sustainably. We believe that he challenged root causes and systems. We believe that he was fierce. We didn't think about religion in terms of comfort. We thought about religion as really being active, as taking action, as changing and addressing root causes. When we thought about the Catholic Church, and I grew up Catholic, we were told the Catholic Church is responsible not only for colonization and slavery, as we know with Junípero Serra, right? We really want to canonize Junípero Serra. We want to canonize someone who actually kept indigenous people captives until they became Christians. That sends a bad message. Maybe we should start thinking about Oscar Romero, right? I'm not going to talk any further about that, but the point is that we are in this historical moment right now where a few things are happening and are aligned at the same time. The population is growing, it's getting huge, the infrastructure is old and getting older, the population is becoming more brown, and it's all happening at the same time as climate change is having its way with us and we're going to have more extreme weather events. We talk about Black Lives Matter, and we forget that more extreme weather events, if police officers cannot handle the daily stresses of everyday life in our community, what's going to happen when we have recurrent extreme weather events? It's really going to test their ability to treat communities that they have historically not honored or respected in a way that they should. There is intersectionality in all of it. All of it, from the beginning of the extraction of our labor to the extraction of fossil fuel, what lands and what places that has happened, and how that shows up in our everyday lives today. And so your charge and your challenge is to figure out How do we do it differently? Because what we've done in the past hasn't worked, and because time is of the essence. Unlike other times when we had time to figure it out, there's no time right now to try to tell you this is the way you do it respectfully. You have to do the inside work. You need to figure out how you come to the table in a way and challenge large organizations that have all of the resources and want to speak for low-income communities and communities of color, and challenge funders who don't have trust in that we say that we're going to do what we're going to do, and invest in organizations to speak for us. That has to change. And if it doesn't change, the biggest obstacle to addressing climate change will continue to be privilege, and not the deniers, and not the folks who don't believe that California is burning. It's going to be the people with good intentions who helicoptered into our communities and told us, we know what's in your best interest. You know who knows what's in our best interest? Our abuelitas, the bodeguero on the corner, the people who struggle every single day, who have been living sustainably for years because of need. They know how to do it. And our responsibility is to facilitate it and grow it, multiply it, and change it up. And if we don't do it, we're in serious trouble. So I want to thank you, and I look forward to questions later on. So gracias.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and particularly I thank you for the charge that you've extended to all of us as we engage at this intersection. Let me call on Geraldine and Mindahi to speak to us about the body of your work and also, obviously, where we find ourselves at this crossroads.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I just want to acknowledge first the Union Theological Seminary, and especially the Center for Earth Ethics, for this wonderful space where we can meet our voices and our spirits and our intentions. Elizabeth made me to remember that this has been a very big process in our history in this land. It's about 500 years or even a little bit more that we have faced on this land, not just changes that we have been facing lately, but changes that we have seen that our voices are not being heard now, and that self-determination is still pending. The recognition of Native peoples in front of nation states is still pending. And just to let you know that it was about 3,000 years ago when we really had humans living all together with nature. At that time, there were kind of more or less 13,500 different languages. Nowadays, we are just left almost with half, 7,000 languages in the world. But we are losing every day, every single day we are losing possibilities. We are losing knowledge in order to understand the complex way of living. Because we have been taught that science that is provided in the universities is the only way that we can achieve how to live. But as Elizabeth told us about her grandma, we already learned about our grandparents. And ever since we lost our institutions here in the Americas, we lost our universities. So we lost also many ways of thinking, feeling. We lost many ways of sharing, but we still do have this knowledge among very special people. So nowadays, you can see that not only humans or cultures are endangered, but also many species that are flora and fauna are also as well. So it means that when we speak about we, with capital letters, we speak about our relations with nature. Every single being here is creator related. So we are not the peak of the creation. We are just among the creation, a very complex creation that is in this holy land. But these 500 years that we have passed by, we were told that sometimes still many cultures think that we are not worth, we have been alienated. So you can see that our ancient cultures, they did many beautiful things. Like they had arts, they had studies on astronomy, studies in mathematics, and many things. But when you are said that you are not worth to do arts, but handicrafts, that your language is not a language, it's just a dialect. And when you are heard that your science, your knowledge is not science, it's just traditional knowledge, right? So it comes all together that there is no acknowledgement or recognition. It was just in 1992, for the first time, when we were participating in the Global Summit in Rio de Janeiro. It was for the first time that indigenous knowledge was acknowledged to be part of the knowledge that is going to be worth in order to go back to the basics. So, law of nature is law of God. Law of the origins is law of God. And we call it Makihmo, the sound of silence. And there's trilogy as well. There's trilogy in the day, the night, and the dusk, and the morning. So we also contemplate trilogy. Because our soul is different than the spirit. The soul, that we have all those thoughts that have been kept by humans, we share, and our bodies. But in order to go back to the origins, we need to respect our bodies, we need to respect our thoughts and our spirits. So, I heard for the first time in the 1992 as well, we need to act locally and to think globally. But it's not just that. We need to think as well globally. We need to think as well locally and to act globally. Because nowadays, the investments that are all over the world is killing us. Because most of the investments around the world are not taking care about humans nor nature. So when we speak about we, as I said with capital letters, we speak about the cosmos as well. And we speak about the moon, the sun, and the 4 elements. So we honor the 4 directions. And it's very basic things. when we talk about well-being, we don't talk about just about the Human Development Agenda. We talk about the spirit that is ready to move to the basics. So we talk about, we want clean earth. We want also just clean water. And also we want clean earth. But nowadays we are talking about clean fire, because fire represents the energy we are using. So we are not using clean fire. So that's the main reason that we are here, because this change is not the first time it's happening in our Mother Earth. But the change now is threatening us, not just humans, but all creation. So I'd like to talk a little bit about sacred sites. We need to recover sacred sites, natural ones, biocultural ones, cultural ones. If we really want to go to the basics, we have to recover those sacred sites. The most important thing now is that we acknowledge native peoples all over the world, because you might be heard about those hotspots around the world where biodiversity and cultural diversity is the most diverse. In those places is where the native people still live. So there is a deep connection with nature. Nature is us. So we want also to think about what future we are going to deliver to our next generations. Before, long time ago, it was planned for 7 generations and so on. But now, it's just to the time for the games. So if we want to think about this, we might be thinking better what generation we are going to deliver to Mother Earth. Come on, thank you.
Marie Lamien. I'm the result of this time in history where migration from very different places into this continent produced that my great-great-grandparents on my dad's side were coming from Scotland, and they came into the south of Chile, and so my father eventually was born, and my mom, on her side, her grandmother was Mapuche, and although this was never talked in the family, she has felt the need to recover her Mapuche origin. Mapuche means Mapu, it's a combination of 2 words, Mapu, which means earth, and Che, which means people. So in Chile, we have Mapuche and also Pehuenche and Huilliche. Pehuenche is the people who are in the deep forests up in the Andes, and they depend on the nuts that are produced by the Pehuen tree, a sacred tree. And the Huilliche are the people from the coast, and they depend only on food coming from the sea. which they honor and praise in many beautiful ways throughout the year. And they will get together, Mapuche, Huilliche, and Pehuenche, because they are harvesting from the different landscapes and the different ecosystems which is their home. They're also praised, and they live by the cycles of the moon. So this need to live by the cycles of the moon has been within me and in my genes, as well as my holding Celtic genes, is something that I came to vindicate when I met Mindahi, because Ñañu peoples are also moon peoples. Their grandmother is Zana, the moon, and all cycles will go by the moon. This is very important because moon, she is always guiding cycles, the feminine aspect of all of the natural beings, the feminine and the need for flowing of the waters. She will be there in the sea. The sea will flow in those rhythms as well, and so will all the water bodies, and we're mainly water. So the moon is the one that is determining life-giving processes. And the one who will nurture us is her daughter, and that is Mother Earth. Mother Earth is the most beautiful being, and like our mother, she will love us unconditionally. However, for some reason that I have asked myself since very young, there is something that we as human beings does not enable us to love Mother. And so this not allowing us to love our Mother and the one who nurtures us unconditionally and loves us unconditionally drives us to do self-destruction processes, starting from our own selves, through our families, through our communities, and beyond. I would like to share how, for our ancestors from these beautiful lands all across this continent, and beyond, of course, in every single continent, knowledge systems are not only generated from the mind. Knowledge is generated from our deep connection that also comes thanks to our whole body and all the capacities that our whole body has to connect to all energies and everything that can be seen and that cannot be seen as well. So knowledge that is generated from this deep connection that is not only through the mind but also through the body, and which flows through the soul and the spirit, is a kind of knowledge that has enabled original peoples, also known as native, also known as indigenous peoples, to understand the beauty and the complexity and the interrelationship and the interdependence and the web of life, where the interconnectedness is also with the celestial bodies, and where the interdependence, of course, is with the mysterious divine energy that is within, dwells within every single being, and is not some energy that is outside of us. And the beauty about having God dwelling within is that we can see the diversity of God's manifestations everywhere. So God, who dwells within every single being and every single thing that we see and touch and interact with and connect with, makes our grandparents greet everything around us. When we go to a home, anywhere, it can be in Mapuche land, it can be, which I know, or it can be in Maya or Ñañu Otomi or anywhere else. I can see how the fire will be greeted every morning. The water that we're gonna put in the pot is talked to. The herbs that we're gonna put in the water for the tea is also spoken to. And as the day goes by, everyone who is gonna help to get something, anything going in harmony in our house is gonna be spoken to and honored all the time. Finally, I want to talk about resilience and adaptability. These words have been used since the last couple of decades. And it is a practice that original people's wisdom has always lived with. The practice of resiliency means the ability to transform energies that could be destructive into opportunities of construction, of creation, of innovation, which is something that is a gift of today's native peoples to humanity. Through creativity, through innovation, by means of applying wisdom and knowledge in so different ways as compared to how knowledge and very structured knowledge systems have been applied today, will make the whole difference. And we will be able to respond to all that is going on in Mother Earth through and thanks to native wisdom and native knowledge systems, and of course, spiritual and faith systems as well. So with this, I'd like to close and pass on the microphone to Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine. And let me say, just after Catherine brings her remarks, we'll have a moment for just a few brief questions. So I'd ask that after you hear from Catherine as well, that you begin to formulate your questions so that we can move to them right away. Catherine Flowers.
Good morning, or good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Center for Earth Ethics, where I served as a senior fellow, for bringing me here and having this opportunity on the ground. These are just simple things that we were taught that were part of our existence. And now we live in a pretty much a throwaway society where instead of saving the mason jars and reusing them, we have paper plates and plastics and so forth. And I'm seeing the residue of that being thrown out on the side of highways where before it was very pristine. And we're also seeing where in these communities where I grew up, which is primarily the results of a lot of importation of slaves to the area. These were plantation communities at one time. And these are large. In the Black Belt of Alabama, you're going to find probably one of the largest black population, African American populations in the state. And also the Black Belt area that extends throughout the South, Southeast in particular. And you will find large populations of black communities, but also in those communities you're going to find at least 70% of the big polluters located in those areas with toxic waste dumps. And one in particular in my area of the Black Belt, Uniontown, lately has been in the news because coal ash has been dumped there as well. And we find that in most of these areas where you find the big polluters, if we were to have a map, and the map would probably overlay over these areas where you have these large African American communities, and also communities where people are poor, and communities where you find indigenous people. So we have to, in looking at climate justice and environmental justice, I think the economic paradigm that we've been perpetuating throughout the years has allowed this to manifest. And what has happened is that the industries that drive those type of products are creating a situation where the residue and waste is being dumped and buried in communities where poor people and African American people do not have, as my sister Elizabeth said earlier, the privilege to keep these things out of those communities, and it's leading to a lot of illness. And in my particular area, I work with wastewater, and what I'm finding is that in these rural communities, people don't even have basic infrastructure in the United States of America. Or raw sewage is actually on the ground, and this is manifesting. And this is one of the perfect intersections between climate change and environmental justice, where we're seeing the manifestation of illnesses that should have been wiped out in the United States in the first half of the last century. And these illnesses include hookworm and other kinds of tropical illnesses that you normally would not find. So much so that doctors in these communities don't even test for them because they are not trained to look for them, because they're not supposed to exist in the United States. But we not only have the intersection of civil rights, where you also find that in these same communities, there's been an attack on voting rights, because the people that support these kinds of industries are usually coming from our communities, not necessarily African American people, but in communities throughout the South. A lot of people that are supporting these industries, a lot of the politicians that are supporting these industries, are also the politicians that are attacking voting rights in the communities that they represent. So I believe that this is an opportunity for us not only to rewrite the narrative, because where I'm from, we just recently had although the governor brought down the Confederate flag, and I'm using this as an example, although the governor brought down the Confederate flag, there are people in the South who still think that the Confederate flag is about heritage. It has nothing to do with segregation, has nothing to do with slavery or any of the social injustices that were wrought on people that live in those areas. Recently, I had the opportunity with the Cairo Center to travel throughout Appalachia and see what was happening in West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee as it relates to the fossil fuel industry. What I saw was sacrilegious, seeing the tops being blown off the mountains, where people are lighting water and it's burning. That's not natural. Well, we also found that the people that set up the mining towns also have there's an intersection with our history in Alabama, because sharecropping and on the plantation and having to go to the store on the plantation, you never really paid up, but you only always had to stay on the plantation. They set up the mining towns the same way. And we have to recognize this, we have to rewrite the narrative. What I saw in West Virginia, same thing I'm seeing in Alabama, where people, we have to get a better understanding of how important it is to tell the story where people can understand it, number one, and where people cannot change what reality really is, as we're seeing in the national election right now, where people are rewriting the narrative to get across their point. We're not doing a good job of that. And I think in order for us to have successes, we have to tell the story, but people are ready to listen. And even in my state, which is probably one of the least progressive states in the United States, recently the State Board of Education passed a resolution that now calls for teaching about the theory of evolution, something which they've never really done in the state of Alabama, and also teaching about climate change. But we have to not only just rest on our laurels because that has happened, we have to make sure that what you're teaching is not some convoluted version that was written up by some organization that has been funded by some famous guys that we know that do not climate change even exists. So we have to be on point. And I will conclude by saying this weekend, another best practice was the Climate Speakers Network, along with Center for Earth Ethics, joined together with local people in Alabama. We had a very, very successful statewide conference on climate change that brought together people from as far north as Huntsville, as far south as Mobile, Bastida, Africatown. People from the western part of the state came from the western part of the Black Belt. People came from Auburn University, University of Montebello, all over the state, black, white, indigenous. We opened that ceremony. And I'm still feeling the results of what happened. We opened by having an optional event where we came together with people from various backgrounds, and we acknowledged our indigenous heritage. And I was able to, for the first time, acknowledge my own indigenous heritage, because if we go back and look at the DNA of most of us, we're going to find that there's some interconnection there. And as a result, I think the power and the spiritual renewal that I got from going to Holy Ground in Alabama is carrying me through what I'm dealing with today, and will carry me forward as we seek to find solutions. And I think that that's one of the best practices. I think we have to go back to the local communities and acknowledge the history and bring together people and give people, as my sister Lila said, give them the ability to claim who they are. And as we claim who they are, I think that we can reclaim Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And once again, let's thank all of our panelists for their contributions. We're going to have time, those who are facilitating for lunch to be ready for us are ready, and we certainly want to be respectful of their time and efforts, so we're going to have time for 2 questions. I'm going to ask you to self-edit and come up with the most intellectually effervescent question out there. Catherine, by the way, did you say folk were funded by 2 brothers that we well know? Was that? I just wanted to make sure. But if we've got several, would you stand, just share with us your name so we can hear you? And I don't know if there's a mic back there or not, but if not, please use your best public space voice. There's one up here. Maybe we can get that back to you quickly. And then if there's someone else with a question, come right on. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Hi, my name is Yang Sisend. I come from St. Joseph Seminary. I'm a student of theology and scripture. And actually, I always frequent here. I participate in all your, wonderful seminars and everything. I really feel very grateful for Center of Earth Ethics. You know, I feel, first I want to commend you. I really feel grateful you bring to us the indigenous people, the culture, they believe, and their innate connection with nature. This is not very much publicized, but I really feel everybody should hear this, you know. And also, as I'm interested in theology, I want to ask you, in this movement of conservation, do you see your respective culture and the beliefs, the religion there, do you receive evolution and renewal? And if you do, and in what way?
I think the question was meant for you too.
Thank you for your words. I think we all need renewal, because we are in a phase that we have to come together and put together. And our beliefs and other religion beliefs, we have to come to an agreement that we can, and really, we have to work together. Not just in our spirits and mind, but in actions. So we need to reinvent ourselves as humans, but we need to acknowledge sacred nature. And the cosmovision that we have, we are going to be shared day by day. And just to let you know that there are some prophecies that talk about that. Talk about the union of the evil and the poor in the Americas, but also talk about the union about sacred sites, especially the big mountains. And it is happening. It is happening now, and I think what we need is common sense. Basic principles like love, earth.
I just want to add that for us, we're part of the climate justice movement, and there is a distinction between the conservation movement and the climate justice movement. And the conservation movement has always really focused on open space and trees and green, where the environmental and climate justice movement has focused on people and its dependency on those things and working with respect for Mother Earth. So I want to say that because there's a big difference where there have been historically in this country racial tensions because a lot of investment and support for these spaces, but not for the people impacted by a lot of the environmental burdens. So that is a little different.
Thank you. And our final question.
You almost answered it. I first want to just thank you for the urgency, the connections, the spirituality you've brought to this discussion. My name is Chandra Taylor Smith, and I'm going to ask this from the location as an eco-womanist theologian. And Swami Paramashanananda said something beautiful this morning at the top of the conversation about how we're not humans seeking spiritual experiences, but we're spiritual beings having human experiences. And a lot of what you said shares that spiritual reality, who we are. But I wanted to see if you could speak to how, in the face of climate and the injustices you've shared, how that impacts our spirits, and how the religious community and the folks here representing different religious faiths and traditions can help nurture our spirits. And some of that has to come from internal, but would love your feedback on that. And I'm particularly thinking about our young people. And if you're seeing how when we do provide voice and help them, are we helping them to develop a different kind of spirituality?
So, thank you for that question. Yeah, we do. We begin with spirit, and with our young people, we talk a lot about wellness. one of the things that I said is that we are the descendants of colonization and slavery. And when I say that, I'm talking about how for so many generations, we have had to live a life of stress. And that life of stress manifests in hopelessness, in mental health issues, in physical health disparities that we all have. And now we're dealing with this issue of climate change. So what does that mean for our communities? If you look at a community in the Rockaways or a community in Red Hook, and people have a way of judging us too because of how we look and what we eat and the choices we make without having lived our lives and knowing how those choices came to be. And so when we work with young people, we really want them to be critical thinkers. You know, you've heard a lot about, for example, the Korean economy, and what that is just 1970s poverty program with a green patina, right? But at our organization, we're talking about young people being the decision makers, the planners, the geographers, the scientists, the engineers. And we've sent 3 young people from the community to Antarctica on scientific expeditions and 1 to the North Pole. That's why we say that our young people are at potential and not at risk, because we were them once when people didn't see what we could be. And when you put that, and they've stopped the siting of a 520 megawatt power plant, doubled the amount of open space in our community, facilitated meetings on brownfields. They are doing, at the age of 15, work that people are learning how to do in graduate school. And so when we see them, we see brilliance. And when you treat them with that kind of respect, and you expect that respect across ethnicity and race, you are suddenly dealing with issues of wellness. You see a young person who had a 50 average, all of a sudden it becomes an A student. And so we don't even have to do tutoring. And we don't have to, with our little kids, what we do with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders is we give them some chocolate and we give them some Skittles. And we ask them to read the contents. And based on their understanding of the contents, they have to determine which one is healthier. And so the idea is for them to really not be passive recipients or to passively participate in a process, but to be really thinking about their environment. We give them maps, and we tell them to map their community and to map the assets and the liabilities. And they start looking at tree pits that there are no trees on and how close they are to the highway. We give them air casters so they measure levels of PM 2.5, carbon monoxide, and all of those chemicals. So all of a sudden, there's an interest in science, and they can see the connection between that and their health or lack thereof, and their asthma. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that because we live at the intersectionality of our needs, of all of the isms and climate change, that having a holistic approach to problem solving and critical thinking and engaging people from a very early age on also addresses the issue of wellness. And are we unwell? Absolutely we are unwell. It was intended for us to be unwell. And so we are dealing, like I had a severe bilateral embolism 2 years ago when I almost died, and my father died of an asthma attack at the age of 50. What do I have in common with people? I live in an EJ community. I work in an EJ community. When I travel to an EJ community. Do I smoke? Do I do drugs? None of that. Try to live as healthy as I possibly could. But I am a walking poster child for all of the public health, all the health disparities that exist in our community. And so we have to create these spaces, and we have to create spaces where we love and protect and nurture each other so that we're modeling behavior that our children need to learn. And learning doesn't just happen in the classroom. It happens in our community. It happens in our organizations. So I'm sorry for going on for so long, but the work with young people for us is so, so important, because they're the generation that's going to be most impacted by choices that came before us, and they need to be at leadership. Leadership is not something that has to be postponed. It happens right now, and it happens with training, with learning about accountability, and with providing them with the tools to do it right now. And so if we do that, they will not only be full of self-esteem and pride and see that their work results in transformation, they will start taking care of their bodies too, as their spirits start feeling so good about how powerful they really are. Sorry.
Coming from the Bible now, I think one good example we exemplified this weekend with the Center for Earth Ethics, that a workshop was conducted looking at the Bible and how the Bible can be used to educate people about our relationship, our real relationship with the earth, because a lot of people in my neck of the woods tend to believe that the destruction of the earth is going to happen because it's been predicted and prophesied. And the workshop that was conducted this weekend gave the theologians that were there the tools that they needed to go and educate people in their congregations. And I think that that's having access to that kind of information is going to be vital in terms of helping young people, old people, middle-aged people to understand that there is something we can do and that it is not predetermined and that is what's going to happen so that we can stop this. Because I think that's part of the narrative that's been promoted in communities so that these companies can get away with poisoning the air, the water, and so forth.
Well said. Thank you all so very much. And let me thank all of you for being part of an incredibly rich and content-rich morning. We're going to continue without skipping a beat. Lunch is ready in the refectory, which is immediately up the steps, but I'm going to allow for Shay to come with any further logistical information as we transition